What's up, gifted family? Welcome to another episode of the show that is the GP YouTube. Just a reminder that if you support what we do here, make sure to go over to giftedperformance.com and sign up for our automated coaching service. For only $1 a day, you'll get access to 15 highly customized training programs, a macronutrient calculator, our meal planning feature that lets you build and save meals based on your macros, as well as access to our private Facebook group. All subscriptions help us in continuing to put out great content to get you to your fitness goals. Thanks for stopping by, and without any further delay, let's get into today's video. Enjoy.
All right, we are back. Another episode with the doctors, Dr. Mike in the house, the real Dr. Mike, and Dr. Maria, the one and only. So we are going to be back answering your injury-related questions again today. Same disclaimer as the previous one. I'll give you an abridged version here. None of us are doctors. We are not trying to treat, diagnose, or heal you. For that, you need to see a general practitioner. Go to a general practitioner. They might write you up a script, and then you can come and see one of these beautiful faces that I see in front of me today. Mike, how you doing today?
I'm good. But depending on the state that you live in, you might be able to just go see a PT. So definitely be sure you check out where you live. Yep. Absolutely.
Maria, how goes it?
It's going well. Nothing
Maria,
major.
You're in prep right now, right?
I am. I'm almost 12 weeks out from first show, so yay.
I cannot wait to do these when you're like 4 weeks out. Mike's gonna have this like big long dialogue, and Maria's gonna be like, yes. Agreed.
Yeah.
All right, so today we're going to start off by talking a little bit of anecdote with Mr. Michael Taylor. Mike, you recently injured your neck. Do you want to talk us through that, like what happened, and then kind of how you, because you said you didn't really want to take any time off, and you're right back to it. So what happened there?
Yeah, so I would say that I did end up taking a little bit of time off just because today is my scheduled rest day. However, yesterday, day like any other, I started to notice a little bit of kind of like tension in my neck. Mostly I was driving off base, and people in Qatar, very kind and pleasant to interact with, but they drive very interesting, I guess I would say. So it's a little bit hectic and kind of scary driving out here. So I could kind of feel myself sort of tensing up, and as the rest of the day is going on, I'm just kind of like, it feels a little tense, but didn't really bother me much. And then I was bench pressing or incline benching. Didn't notice anything during the lift, but at some point as I was walking around the gym, I was just kind of very aware of the fact that I could not turn my head to the left. You can kind of see I'm able to do it now, but last night, not so much. And so I don't know. I wouldn't say I like injured it. I wouldn't say the driving caused it. I wouldn't say the bench pressing caused it. I would say it's, kind of a multifactorial experience that's going on. And for me personally, this is not the first time I've experienced something like that. Maybe others can relate to it. For me, I'm good for these episodes probably twice a year. They'll just happen seemingly out of nowhere. And I just wanted to share it today just to kind of just give a little bit of like you said, anecdote, and that, my main takeaways were, I finished my workout in the gym. It didn't feel amazing, but it actually didn't bother me that much. And I was lifting, shoulders and back. So definitely involved the area a lot, but, tried to, remind myself that yes, it's uncomfortable when I do this, but, as long as I didn't do that, it was pretty much okay. Was annoyed by it and probably cranked on it too much later in the evening, but did as much just gentle movement as I could. I walked around a lot today, just a nice kind of gentle, low impact kind of cardio day. Started to feel better. My coworker did work on it a little bit, some mobilization. We didn't do any manipulation, dry needling, anything like that, but a little bit of kind of graded motion really seemed to help me get that last little bit of rotation. And since then, I've just been going ham with as many retractions and and cervical snags, which I'll show you real quick if you're watching at home.
Uh-oh.
This is the most money
These are
exercise
good.
in the world.
Came
These are good.
prepared.
Yeah. So get like a towel or a sheet or something, cross it over. And so for me, it was turning my head to the left. So if you kind of pull with a little bit of left force, just kind of gives you a little bit of added motion. Feels a lot better and kind of lets you push into that end range. So I've probably done like, I don't know, at least 1 million of those. But anyway, it's an anecdote, one, but two, I just think it goes to show that, when you have the proper framework for conceptualizing the experience, that, oh my God, it's not like I'm not going to die. My training is not going to be like ruined. And I kind of know some of the tools I need to do to hit it up. It's feeling probably like 60 or 70% better today. And I'm expecting to go in tomorrow and high bar squat relatively heavy, whatever Thomas decides to put together. So, I mean, just goes to show folks, like, don't let it freak you out. Stay composed would be my overriding message, I guess.
So when little stuff like that pops up, what do you think is kind of like the worst practice that you see from people? They've got this like little seemingly out of nowhere injury. What's probably the worst thing that you can do in a scenario like that?
Oh man, you want to go first, Maria? You can.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Like 10 minutes. I need to drink some water.
Yeah, I mean, based off of that situation, other situations similarly, with an acute strain like that or something of that nature, when people sit still and like just freeze up and lock up and don't move, that makes it so much worse. And so going into the gym and doing maybe a lighter training session or a little bit of like back exercises, something to actually move, that's gonna be so important to actually relieving the symptoms.
Definitely, yeah. And I did probably go a little bit lighter that day, but it was kind of counterintuitive. I did kind of feel myself like I was like, dang, should I go back? And then I remembered, I was like, wait a second, no, you shouldn't. You should still exercise today and not just go back to your room and watch Netflix. So I didn't do that. I wanted to, but kept moving. Like I said, today walked around a bunch. So just kind of like that low impact cardio and not letting it get you down, I think, is another thing. Like, besides just like any of the physical stuff, not letting it get you just totally spun up and stressed is also super important. And going along with that, I mean, it can be good to kind of try to like, deconstruct the events like I kind of did, but I think it's probably futile for the most part to try to like attribute it to any one thing. Because like I said, it's like, I do have some history of stuff on the right side, like always happens on the right side when it does. When I get shoulder issues with my right side, like, is it that? Is it from the driving? Is it the bench press? Who knows? But, we kind of knew what you need to do to get it feeling better. And I'm going to keep training like normal. So.
Now, is there like an opposite end of the spectrum there? So like you said, doing like absolutely nothing would be bad. And then I am assuming that like ignoring and going back to the gym 100% would also be bad. It's like that inverted U where like some light activity is probably your best course of action. Sitting on your butt doing nothing is not going to help. Going full out and acting like it never happened is probably not going to help either.
Like yes and no, I guess.
Okay,
I'm
let's hear
kind
it.
of trying to pretend like, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of trying to pretend like it never happened. Because I mean, so for me, I finished my bench. That was all I had to do benching, right? So I didn't have that to compare to. But then I went and I did like bent over rows, and intuitively you would think that a real heavy, kind of pulling movement like that would be, I don't want to say it's like problematic or not, but it didn't seem like the thing I wanted to do at that moment for sure. But I mean, I still worked up to inside the target range that Tom had laid out for me and stuff. So I mean, I was maybe a little bit more ginger with it than I would normally be. I wasn't maybe pulling through the bar as hard as I could, like trying to just like jam it into my chest like I would normally try to be with like a bent over row. But yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, it's almost in some cases maybe good to kind of try to ignore it. I mean, there's limits to this, and this is why we're not trying to tell everybody to do this. Of course, I'm just sharing my own experience. But yeah, I think carrying on within limits would be good. I of course warmed up, and if I was getting issues at my first or second warm up set, that would be pretty indicative of maybe how high my top end for that workout was going to be. But overall, if I didn't have any pain while lifting, it was mostly turning my head like to look at my phone or something like that between sets. I would feel problem. So, I mean,
So I think I'm gonna jump ahead on you guys on the list of questions. So we'll jump into a question because this kind of transitions perfectly into one of our questions. We're gonna jump all the way down to the one from Jimmy, from one of my clients, James. Jimmy asked, "Is there any injury bad enough to where we would say never squat, never deadlift again?" Anyone want to raise their hand and volunteer on that one to start us off? Maria, you look like you're chomping at the bit. Maria, is there?
I mean, I don't know injury per se, but I would say like a diagnosis. So I've heard of a lot of people like with certain spinal conditions, ankylosing spondylitis being one of them that I can think off the top of my head, where they really say maybe don't axially load the spine just because there is an actual condition involved with like the bony structure. So I would think those things would be the only case where I'd say a hard no to certain types of movement, but I don't know if specifically if injuries per se, I don't think I would ever, because I mean, I have like 90-year-old patients doing deadlifts in the clinic too. And I mean, they've got all kinds of issues with their spines. So.
Mike, anything to add?
yeah, I mean, I would kind of agree with that. I think it would have to go along with like a specific diagnosis and say, even with like, say if someone had a legitimate spinal cord injury, like even the level would probably have an impact to that. And, I would say, do you sit down to go to the bathroom? I mean, if so, like you're squatting. So are we talking about just like the movement or loading it, and to that degree, like how much? But obviously with certain levels of spinal cord injury, you're going to be affected with your bowel and bladder as well. So that would be impacted as far as your goals would go there. And then another example I was thinking of with that, or maybe there would be some reluctance to want to do those things, would be like if there was like a certain type of like muscular dystrophy, which again kind of goes beyond what you're going to encounter in your standard physical therapy outpatient type clinic. I was even trying to think if there were like specific like orthopedic surgeries with like different types of hardware. And long term, I couldn't really think of any replacements and stuff like that. I'd still load them, not right away, but within their range of motion too. So, so yeah, I don't think there's really anything like orthopedics wise, with maybe the ankylosing spondylitis as like an exception, that I would say hard out. Like I wouldn't, even then I would still consult with a like an ortho, see what they thought.
I do think it's a pretty interesting question because you hear this a lot from people, and I'm sure you guys hear it a lot from people, where it's like, my doctor says I injured my X, Y, or Z, and I'm no longer able to squat and deadlift. So maybe what are the most common injuries from people that come to you and say, hey, my doc said I have this, I'm no longer able to squat, deadlift, load the spine, whatever it might be. Mike, what do you hear from people?
I mean, if I were to, are you talking about like diagnoses that people come in claiming to have, or?
Yeah, so maybe the doctor says, oh, you've got a herniated disc, you need to completely stay
Yeah.
away from all of these exercises.
Yeah, I mean, like people come in talking about like their herniated discs. They got an MRI like 10 years ago. People come in with those, degenerative disc disease, which I always go through the talk with them that you can't see pain on an MRI, and that discs do heal over time. So, those are like typical ones that I see as far as like diagnoses and stuff. And even, but there's evidence that people can have those findings and not have pain. So logically, it would be absurd to suggest that you can't load those things because it'll hurt if people could be doing it anyway and have no pain. It's kind of crazy to me just the way that the MRI results, and there's purposes for MRI. It's not totally useless, of course, but I know all of this about, I live and breathe it, but I think it would still kind of mentally affect me if I were to get an MRI of my low back. And I'll bet there's some stuff going on for sure, just given history and age and stuff like that. So even though I know that it's not predictive of pain necessarily, I think it would still be like mentally a little bit jarring. So I think that's a lot of it, is like almost the effects of just being educated about this thing that's like wrong with them. So that's what I think kind of like is on display when we talk about that really like pronounced reaction to those encounters.
Maria, do you see some similar stuff?
Yeah, one case in particular that I can think of, I had a guy in his early 30s who was retired military, and he had been actually deadlifting when he got hurt, and so he had a disc herniation or anything like that. But this happened like years ago, and he didn't really have any pain associated. He had a really hypomobile lumbar spine because he had honestly just taken all this time to not extra, like he wasn't squatting, he wasn't deadlifting, he was kind of essentially babying himself, even though he didn't have any symptoms, because his doctor was like, oh, you can't do this. So essentially, therapy for him was just teaching him how to squat and deadlift properly again and actually get his lumbar spine moving. But that was one of those cases where he thought, oh no, I have a disc herniation, I can't do anything ever again. And he actually made himself worse by not exercising. So, I mean, if you properly dose it accordingly and you're not overly loading, like accidentally loading, then I don't see why there'd be an issue. But yeah, I do see that pretty common. I'd say disc herniation would be the biggest one. Yeah.
Yeah, I have whoa, a little story. When I was 17, I injured my back doing a deadlift. Just a cat back, 17-year-old senior in high school, hyped up on Jack 3D deadlift, and my back popped, cracked, something or other. And it was like so bad that I spent probably 2 or 3 days just like flat on my back in bed, like wasn't getting up, wasn't moving, any of that. Went to the doctor, a million tests, MRIs, CAT scans. They did that radioactive dye injection test, all that. Um, and ended up with a diagnosis of like a spondy or something. And I got the same speech from the doctor. It was like, don't squat anymore. If you're gonna squat, it needs to be squats that don't load your spine. So maybe like a light front squat or a goblet squat if you're gonna do that. Definitely don't deadlift again. And I took that advice very seriously, and my back like just it just hurt, like it always hurt. And then I started progressively working my way back into squatting and deadlifting, and I ended up squatting 550 at my best and deadlifting 635 at my best. My back never felt better than when I was making those huge lifts, than when I was at my strongest. So it's kind of this like reverse logic of like, just let the area get extremely weak by never strengthening it, and then that'll get you a lot better. It's interesting to me. But a common lower back injury that I probably didn't really see too much of it 5, 6 years ago, but 2, 3 years ago, everyone started talking about this area, and that was SI. I'm sure you guys being in the field, you guys hear about it all the time, but like it was like lifter culture grabbed onto the SI joint and they just ran with it. So ramen noodles, our next question. He asks how to help a lifter effectively rehab from SI pain. Mike has left the chat to get back to a regular training routine. So we're rehabbing SI pain to get back to a regular training routine. Step number one, Mike, what do we do?
So I so the SI, and I will admit I once had what I thought was an SI joint issue, and maybe I did. I don't know. I never got it formally diagnosed. Um, the reason that I kind of like I don't like cringe at SI or whatever. It's like people can call it what they want to call it, but it has a very similar presentation to also a lot of just lumbar spine, presentations, like unilateral, one-sided, hurts when you squat, do stuff like that. A lot of similar things. And even if somebody did have like diagnosed, because we have like test clusters that have been validated that can identify, if the SI joint versus the lumbar spine is I hate to use the word like pain contributor, but we'll go with that for right now. If that's the source, quote unquote, of the pain, I would treat it honestly the exact same as I would treat any like lumbar or hip thing, which would be kind of identifying the issues that the specific individual is having. So if they're having like say issues going into, say lumbar flexion or like deep hip flexion or extension, it honestly depends. So the way that I would go about doing it would be feedback on me. Would be like focus on any. I'm sorry. I keep hearing myself. It trips me out.
Echo.
Yeah. So basically, like lifter specific would be the keyword. I would start relatively light and in a range, be it weight, be it ROM, variation, whatever that the individual is comfortable with, and then just aim to progress. That's that's honestly what I did with my back injury, SI injury, whatever I had back in college. Started real light and just kind of add a little bit, and eventually it just kind of got back to normal. With if somebody truly had like an SI joint issue, I might put a premium on some single leg stuff initially just to really work some deep hip stabilization, but it would depend on the individual. So that's me.
Maria, what you got on SI?
SI gets me fired up. I like this one. All right. So it depends on where I see it. So I actually see it a lot more coming in lately with my pediatric population. So my high schoolers, a lot of times they go to the primary care, which are the majority of the referrals. And they'll be like, oh, I landed funny when I was jumping playing basketball, or a lot of cheerleaders as well. So the doctor immediately is like, oh, it's your SI. But a lot of times associated, they have a lot of spinal weakness. So they're like Gumby children. They're just kind of floppy. They don't really have any motor coordination skills. So I would treat it the same too. I really, really focus on spinal stability exercises, bilateral loading. So doing a lot of like squats and movements like that, and then progressing them to single leg stuff, then progressing them back into plyometrics. So like if it's my cheerleaders or, basketball players, stuff like that, I want to make sure before I discharge them that they're able to land like a single leg hop or something like that, so that I know they're at like that full prior level of function. But a lot of times, like I do the SI joint cluster for testing and stuff in the evals, and like 9 times out of 10, it's not SI joint. A lot of times it's just lumbar instability. It's like maybe an iliolumbar sprain, something of that nature. It's something else most of the time. Like usually the only time I'm truly like, oh yeah, it's SI, it's when it's like an older female, potentially like postpartum, something like that, where I know the SI joint's going to have more instability, where there's more laxity. But like with kids and with men, I don't really think that it's as common as people think it is.
And we are going to handle the question at the top of our list. So we are moving on from backs. We're going to move down the body down to the ankle. So how to reduce ankle pain at the bottom of a squat. So let's assume that someone is reaching, what's max knee flexion? Someone throw out a number at me. What is it, 130, 140? Did I pay attention?
Yeah, between there. Yep.
I did good. I paid attention. My kinesiology teacher should be proud. So let's say someone's hitting 140 degrees of knee flexion and they're having some ankle pain. Maria, what might be some of the first things that you look for?
I would look at the talocrural joint stiffness and just kind of see what the overall ankle mobility is. So if they've had like any acute sprain recently or anything of that nature, sometimes that joint itself can get very, very tight. And also the fibular mobility as well. So a lot of it I would approach as a PT, doing a lot of joint mobilization, really working on doing that first and then having them try squatting and seeing if that helps. So that'd be my first route, is just to see the overall ankle mobility and just how stiff the overall ankle joint is. And then, of course, moving up the chain, looking a little bit more at like the gastrosoleus, seeing if we need to do a little bit of stretching there as well.
Cool. Mike, anything to add there?
Definitely echoing what she said as far as checking the joint mobility pretty early on. Other stuff I'll do a lot is I like to mob some ankles, but also I like to just put a 10-pound plate under, or I guess a 5-pound plate under dudes' heels and just be like, just go squat anyway, because they don't have like Olympic lifting shoes or whatever. So if they're that limited, I like kind of using that as a workaround. That always blows people's minds if they've never seen that before, which feels fun. Also, just like maybe like manipulating their squat stance too. Maybe going like with a wider stance if they were like really narrow. While because it takes time is the big thing for like those joint mobilizations or any like stretching, soft tissue stuff you're gonna do to like have any effect. You can get some like intra-session changes, but for it to be lasting, it's gonna take a lot of exposures. So in the meantime, I like to do those other things to try to continue training. So it's a good combo of both of those things.
I think a popular Instagram page and like the ankle mobility, squatting, ankle relation there would probably be Squat University. Everyone knows Squat University, Dr. Aaron. Some of the stuff that he commonly posts would be like banded ankle distractions. Do we give that a yay or a nay?
I mean, I've prescribed them before for somebody who was doing a lot of weightlifting and everything, just because he was having pain at the end range of his squat. He had a previous injury though, so I was doing a lot of mobs with him in clinic, and then I was giving him that as kind of a little bit of a warm up to do on his own, just so that it was getting a little bit more carryover with what I was doing. But I think there's a place for it, yeah.
So, Mike, with things like that, with those banded ankle distractions, when we strap the band on the front of the ankle and we kind of step away from the vertical upright or whatever we're doing there, we put our foot up on a box or something. What are we trying to accomplish there? What's actually going on within the ankle joint?
So theoretically, with either the band or with, say, like our hands, when we're trying to do a mobilization manual therapy technique, in that instance, if we're talking about talocrural joint mob, we're talking about moving the tibia on top of the talus, either forward or back. Typically, the setup for the ankle mob that you maybe see on on YouTube, Instagram, whatever, is going to involve like a posterior translation of the tibia on top of the talus. So I don't know if this is going to come across as good as I hope. So we got the head of the talus here, horns down or whatever. You got the tib fib right there. And so we're basically trying to kind of push the tibia back while we're trying to kind of go into deeper degrees of dorsiflexion. I personally, I have not had much success with the band. Now, I don't think that it makes the band a bad idea. I just have had issues with getting people to position it just right, with one, compliance there, two, compliance just because most people that I see don't have just like the heavy duty like CrossFit mobility bands laying around. So typically I have not used that, but usually I'll just have them kind of either put their foot supported up on top of like a bench or something like that, an elevated surface that they can kind of single leg squat onto while still maintaining most of their weight or as much weight as they need on their opposite leg, and just kind of holding their heel down and really just kind of trying to jam their ankle into as much dorsiflexion as they can. Doesn't always feel nice, I guess, which is another aspect of the mobilization that can be helpful. Is the theory is it provides, say, like maybe more space in the joint, and that may be true. I don't recall. I know there've been studies on, say, ankle mobs and stuff like that, and I don't recall the specific results as far as like mechanism sides they being like effective, but also can't exclude the fact that you are just kind of applying a nice little novel stimulus to the ankle that maybe you don't get every day. Just kind of helps to change up the way that it feels while you're kind of jamming into this. Whoops, I'm gonna nocebo check myself. While you're pushing into a new degree of dorsiflexion that you maybe wouldn't otherwise tolerate. So that's what I personally think is going on. I don't think the bands are necessarily bad. I just have not had much success with them personally. So
Now I'm trying to think of some of the other stuff he recommends, and you can kind of throw some stuff in here. I know he recommends like some foam rolling of the Achilles area. Do we see anything there? Foam rolling of the Achilles area? Yay, nay, somewhere in between?
I usually don't prescribe that just because a lot of people that I see don't have foam rolls anyway. So I'm more apt to do something like Mike was saying, with just giving them different stretches or different positions like that, and then doing like the basic like seated versus like with the knee straight versus knee bent, just like the regular gastroc stretch too.
Mike, about the same.
yeah, pretty much. I use a foam roll for like self-mobilizing your T-spine, and that's about it.
All right, guys, throw away your foam roller. What about the ones with the knobs on it? Those ones hurt extra. Do they work better?
I don't think so.
Hurts more, works better, just like making love, right?
Yeah, especially on
Something
your IT
like
band.
that.
Yeah.
All right, there's your ankle cure. You're welcome. Up next, we are going to be talking about acute glute strain. I like the rhyme right there, dropping bars, DPT bars.
Cute
How to
glutes.
come back from an acute glute strain. I've been told that I have cute glutes, but I've never had an acute glute strain. Mike, you love talking about butts. Go get them.
Phrasing? You're not doing phrasing anymore. Yeah, so I mean, I think the first thing that I would want to be sure of is that we were talking like the diagnosis was correct. And what I mean by that is not that I think that somebody would be reporting inaccurate like symptoms, but I would be all about wanting to screen out their lumbar spine like first and foremost, just because if we're going after the hip and it's truly like a lumbar referred issue, um, the potency of our interventions are going to be a little bit affected. So after doing that, you treat it, like once we've narrowed in the fact that it is in fact, say like a glute strain, which, I suppose is like possible to do, especially in some athletes. I would say probably see a lot more of like a tendinopathy, which, again, I don't think I would really treat it very differently, except for maybe like when it came on, like painfully. So, like I see in the notes here, doing like some isometrics, temporary decrease in training volume, stuff like that, and then just kind of progressing as the individual can tolerate.
So is Anthony tap dancing in the background?
He's not. I'm actually, there's really no noise coming from anywhere, so
Really?
I'm not really sure. I think there's a
Anthony
ghost.
quit tap dancing. All right, glutes. Maria, what's up on glutes?
Yes, so this is actually my question because I did this a while back. So back when I first started training for my first competition, might have actually been after the show. It might have been like when I was kind of like reversing back up. I did have a glute strain and I thought it was lumbar at first. I was freaking out, thought I had hurt my low back. I was in PT school at the time, so I had my professors kind of rule in, rule out certain things. And they're like, yeah, you just strained your glute, you're fine. So I focused on isometrics and decreasing my training volume, and I had really good success with that. The one thing that I did do was trigger point release for my piriformis area because I did have a lot of tightness. And so I would use like a lacrosse ball and really tried to like get in there. Did not feel good, but it worked. And then my big thing was not overstretching. So I was chronically stretching my glute max like all the time, and it was just making it worse. And finally I sat down with myself. I'm like, okay, you need to like chill out. And decreasing the overall stretching I was doing actually helped a lot. But one thing that I found to be particularly challenging with this, just in the recovery process, was the fact that I was sitting all day for class. And so similarly, if you have a job where you're sitting all the time, it's going to be very uncomfortable after you get up from sitting all day. So then that's when I would say, yeah, stretching, trigger point release, maybe a little bit of heat and everything just to get symptoms down would be a really good idea.
Sounds about right to me. Mike?
How'd you do it? Do you mind me asking? Like, what was it like a sudden, like acute deal, or did you just like
Maxing the fuck out.
I'm not sure. I honestly can't remember off the top of my head right now, but I want to say I was deadlifting, but I was probably sumo deadlifting, which I don't do anymore.
Okay.
So I believe that's when it occurred. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you stop sumo deadlifting? Is it because you wanted to be a real person and respected in society?
Yes.
Feel you on that.
Yeah,
Feel you on
strange.
that.
Yeah.
All right. If Maria's allowed to ask herself questions, then I'm allowed to interject my questions here too. And here comes mine. So, my question was, I see a lot of new recovery tactics that people are throwing a ton of money at. That's my biggest problem with these is that people throw so much money at them. And these are things like cupping, graston, dry needling, Theraguns. I'm sure I'm missing a ton of these, but these are couple $100 per session or to actually buy the modality. So is there validity there? Is it worth the money? Is it a tool in your tool bag? Just kind of comment on what you see there. Mike, I'll let you start.
So overall, the evidence is not like great for those things, and of the evidence, there's not a lot of it in general. It's just quantity wise, there's not a like million studies on these things, and the studies that are there, it's not that the evidence is like telling us conclusively it's bad, but even the studies that are saying, oh, it might be good, there are like a lot of limitations in them. So it's still with a lot of these things, because like you said, I think you said in the question that they're emerging, so they're kind of new. So we don't have a lot of evidence to say conclusively that these things are like good or bad. I would probably err on the side of them not being a foundational part of your rehab plan. I kind of treat them because so I'll admit it. You know, I'll admit it. You guys can come at me if you want, but I do a little bit of dry needling. They do train us on that. It's a big part of yep. hmm
Get out of here. Leave. Leave. He's done.
Yeah, so we keep them around, keep that thing on me. Um, I probably do it in like 1 in 20 people, honestly. So it's not like a huge part of my practice. It was when I learned how to do it in school because you can impart like a really massive, in some cases, symptom change really quickly. And I would assume it'd be very similar for stuff like graston, cupping, theraguns, because a lot of it has to do with the narrative associated with it. You're kind of telling the people, or at the time I was telling people, that it was going to like definitely help them feel better, it helped with healing and all this, that, and the other. Now I'm pretty clear about it, saying it's like taking an Advil. It kind of can help with maybe some symptoms now. It might help you feel a little bit better about some of the exercises I'm going to give you anyway, but long term, the results are probably um, not going to be that different whether you do it or don't. And it's kind of funny. Most people don't want to get needles poked in them. So when I kind of explain it to them that way, they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm good actually." So, so yeah, I would say it's like a lot of like a placebo effect can't be overlooked. Would be what I would kind of conclude with, and that doesn't mean that it's like bad. It just has to mean I think we have to be honest with how we're approaching these things, and kind of the way that we utilize them in our treatment plans, being, say, some sprinkles versus like the ice cream.
Very true. Maria, anything to add there?
I mean, I completely agree. I feel like they're tools in the tool bag, but they're not like the primary mode. I mean, in Florida, we can't do dry needling anyway. At least not, us. Just because it, they were trying to pass it and then didn't work out, and so hopefully moving forward we will be able to, because it would be nice to learn, because in the public schools we can't learn it yet just because of the fact that it's not passed yet. But I do use the graston quite a bit, especially with acute injuries. I find that to be very helpful for people, very therapeutic. But that is, one little item in the whole therapeutic plan for them. Cupping, I don't really do. I've done cupping for myself for like an acute upper trap strain or something, and it seems to work out. I mean, it feels good for a little bit, but at the same time, it might come back the next day. It doesn't solve the problem. It's just a nice little band-aid, essentially.
Yeah. So the price tag on this stuff, a couple $100. Is it worth what you get from it? Dog
I
number
don't
two.
think so.
Get out of here. You want to be famous?
No. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I see, and you see a lot of, maybe it's just because of my proximity to the field. I see a lot of, and Maria, I know you probably see the same thing. A lot of bodybuilders getting like extensive graston work, doing a ton of cupping, like weekly cupping. They're not injured. They don't have any. They're not working through anything, but they're promoting some sort of hypertrophic or some sort of performance benefit from the therapy itself. Is that, what do we rate that from evidence-based to utter hogwash?
I would say more on the hogwash side of things, but at the same time, when you are in prep, like deep into prep, and you're healing a lot slower, it might feel pretty good, especially if you have any acute strains that pop up. So I can understand why people do it. But the price tag, no, I'm not going to spend that kind of money. I mean, during prep last time, I definitely went and got deep tissue massages more frequently than normal. But at the same time, that was because I was willing to fork over the money, and I knew it wasn't solving anything. It just felt good.
Yeah, I used to do something similar. Those last 3 weeks leading up to competition, I would do like one or two deep tissue massages, and I felt like it was helping at the time. It felt good. It was a stress reliever. It probably, on that side of things, reduced stress, improved recovery, and that's actually why I felt better there. But Mike, this is more of like a holistic kind of the whole field question that I have for you going off of this. In terms of like the emerging newer strategies, Is there anything that you see maybe that exists right now, or maybe something that you see down the line coming out that's going to reinvent the wheel on recovery? Are we headed towards kind of like a recovery breakthrough, or are we always going to revert back to the stuff that always worked is what works?
That's a good question. I would probably be inclined to say that like the fundamentals or whatever are going to be the the big thing long term. I feel like in a way the fundamentals kind of are coming back in vogue in some ways. I think for a while, or maybe when say like the 80s and 90s with PT was very like hot pack and e-stim and ultrasound whatever. Like we're kind of drifting away from that in the rehab world, and we still have these like neat little gimmicks and stuff, but I do think that PT overall is taking on more of like a strength and conditioning framework, which I think will be important for recovery because the training will be better programmed basically. So maybe we'll have fewer onsets of these injuries, aches and pains or whatever because you have more intelligent training. Maybe not though. And with that too, I think also like some not overemphasis of like I don't want to get into like a big pain science thing or whatever, but I think just having some awareness and knowledge of the pain science and stuff, and that yeah, sometimes pain's going to be a normal thing that we feel, but it doesn't have to be something we have to like abolish. We don't have to like tightness in the muscles isn't something we need to like constantly get rid of. Sometimes it's just normal. So little things like that. Yeah, I don't know if I would say there's like any like new emerging thing, like maybe BFR in some respects, but even that's going to still kind of come down to, like if you're healthy enough to train at a heavier intensity, you probably should train at a heavier intensity. You're going to get a better response there. But, if you are too weak or like, post-operative or something like that, there is some evidence that BFR can be helpful initially for strengthening. So that might be one thing.
Cool. Maria, anything to add there? Any new strategies that you see?
No, I think BFR is a very good point, though. Definitely.
Yeah. So I read a quote a while back that I'll take credit for. It's mine. And that was that when the capacity exceeds the demand, injury risk drastically goes down. So when your capacity to produce force exceeds the demands that are being placed on the body, you see a lot less injury risk. We good there? In agreement there? So Mike brings up a good point that like the strength conditioning side plays a very important role in the PT side in that you're building up kind of the force producing capacity of the tissue so that it can kind of resist some of those strains. Mike, you made a face. Why are you making a face at me?
I'm sorry. No one's doing that. I was nodding along, I promise.
Perfect. Good. Yeah. See, that's the point of this. The point of this is that I just come on here and I say crazy things, and then I have two really smart people to agree with me, and then the world thinks that I'm very, very smart. All right. You guys want to knock out one more easy one? Maybe it won't be easy. Maybe it won't be easy. All right. So this one is number 9. I have a persistent low back ache every time I work out. Ready? Quick fix. Don't work out. No back pain. I recently started a new office job, trained 3 to 4 times a week.
Solution. Quit your job.
A mix of cardio classes and resistance training with machines. What could be the cause of my symptoms? So breaking it down, low backache, new office job. I'm assuming, what are we assuming here with new office job? Sitting around all day? So sedentary, stuck in an office chair, we'll say. Doing a mix of cardio and resistance training with machines. Maria, what could be the cause of the symptoms?
Yeah, so this was actually one of my recent cases, and she's about 24 years old. She was working previously in a job where she was up on her feet all day, everything like that. And then she just started this new job, and she's having like this persistent, like achy feeling in her back. So first thing I looked at was hip flexors and iliopsoas. And sure enough, she had a very positive Thomas test, and she had a lot of symptoms with psoas palpation. So we worked on a lot of just mobility stuff because the fact she's sitting all day, she's stuck in that hip flexed position. Then she would try to go work out, and she was like a weekend warrior. She'd go and work out a couple times here and there. throughout the week maybe, but overall just she was just really, really tight. Her hips were just very immobile. And so that was directly relating to her low back discomfort that she was feeling. So there was nothing actually specifically wrong injury wise. It was just the fact that she needed to stretch more. And she's been having great success since.
Mike, I think you muted yourself.
Did I mute myself?
Nope, you're good.
Nope, I'm good. Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Cool.
Anything to add there?
Yeah, no, I would say, whenever there's a big change, it can be helpful to look at those factors. Like in that case, there was seems to have been a very direct kind of maybe causal relationship, which has been, good to, I don't want to say exploit, but really directing a lot of your efforts with the rehab. And it sounds like that's been helpful. I've kind of actually had a lot of similar stuff out here too, just because some people are coming out here. So we have this, so I'm Air Force active duty, but we also have the reserves and the National Guard too. So there's people who are working in any other type of job really besides the military 365 days a year. They go to drill once a month or whatever, but then they actually do get deployed. So we have a lot of people who come out here and are suddenly working in a very different environment. So for me, it's literally the same, besides I just do it a little bit more here. But other people maybe went from being a teacher to being, I don't know, working security forces and standing at the gate all day and stuff like that. And so, the illustration I just want to make here is just whenever there is a sudden change, homeostasis is basically disrupted in that person. And it doesn't have to always have that direct relationship like you were able to find there. Sometimes I think it's just important to, express to the individual that, when these changes happen, other changes can occur as well. And sometimes just maybe takes a little bit of time for things to sort of settle. So in this case, was the settling, the stretching, it sort of sounds like it, but also too, maybe she's going to also just get, more used to her job, the tempo, and she'll, the rhythm of, her day in, day out activities will probably get more normal to her. So I just think that's an important thing to consider too, is just that homeostasis gets disrupted and things happen. So they can get weird.
Maria, I like that you brought up the weekend warrior kind of mentality there. The people who are very, very sedentary throughout the entire week. I just picture their body just tightening up all week. And then Saturday, you finally get some free time. They're like, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to absolutely blast myself.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of like a microcosm of what Mike is talking about, where you've got all of these months of basically doing nothing, working as something like a teacher, and then you get this big disruption of homeostasis and you get deployed where you're extremely active, you're on your feet all the time. So for stuff like that, it's like a shift of mentality for people where it's let's take that Saturday and Sunday huge dose of exercise and let's spread it across the week so that we can kind of see those benefits protracted over a longer period of time, instead of just, I'm going to be lazy, I'm going to absolutely crush myself. But tough mentality, for people to get into. And I think that's going to be our last question of the day. We are coming up on time. Mike, do you have any PT hot takes to leave the people with for the day?
PT hot takes.
Or any hot takes, life hot takes.
Any hot takes. Well, so Clemson basketball cheated their way into a win, and
I saw that.
I can't respect that. So
I witnessed that.
Yeah, no, we all witnessed it. So yeah, I can't respect that.
Maria, what do you want to leave the people with?
Oh, this time, wow. Same thing as before. If you have any questions, concerns regarding potential recent injuries or chronic pains, please reach out to either Mike or myself, and we will give you information best we can. And then anything else aside from that, please go see a physical therapist. And remember, here in the state of Florida, if that's where you're watching from, we do have direct access, so you do not need to go to primary care first.
Right on. I'm going to leave the people with a hot diet soda find. Big diet soda fan. I don't know if you guys are too. You guys fan of ginger ale?
Heals everything. Yes.
What's that brand that makes like a lot of ginger ale? Schweppes, not Schweppes, the other one. Canada Dry.
Yeah.
Canada Dry Diet Cranberry. Give it a shot, Mike. I don't know if you're going to be able to find it. I found it at Publix. Maria, you'll be able to find that. All right, everybody go out and get yourself some cranberry diet ginger ale. Crack a nice crispy cold one while you watch this podcast and stay gifted. See ya.